Welcome to the Free Life Podcast, where our show is dedicated to helping you find freedom through Christ. Today, we are going to ride a roller coaster of emotions with Dr. Brooke Jones, founder and creator of Stronger Women, a curriculum designed to help women gain victory over domestic violence. Dr. Brooke goes deep in sharing her story, her lowest valleys, and her highest mountaintops.
And he decided that he was going to beat me and hold me hostage. This was my husband. This was the person who was to love me, vowed to cherish me, take care of me, and he was holding me hostage in a bathroom for multiple days.
She has miraculously turned her darkest tragedies into the brightest triumphs. Listen to her conversation with Pastor Casson. You can hear more from her at our Purple Conference on October 8th at Freedom Place Church, or find her information at strongerwomen.com.
So thank you, Dr. Jones, for being here today. We're so excited to have you speak at our Purple Conference coming up soon. Today, I just wanted to have you on our podcast to give a preview of really who you are, what you do, your role in helping women find freedom from domestic violence situations, really moving them from victims to survivors.
Yes.
And all the fallout of those experiences with families and society as well. So if you would, please take a moment, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in the domestic violence realm.
Well, thank you for having me here today, and it's a pleasure, and I can't wait until the Purple Conference Day. We're going to have a great experience. So, my name is Dr. Brooke Jones, and I have been working in domestic violence since 2006, and I personally was a victim of domestic violence in multiple relationships, teen dating and violence, and even childhood sexual abuse. So for me, it's been a long lifetime of working through some of these challenges. Right now, I'm married, happily married. I have 2 teenage kids, 2 dogs, and 3 cats. And live here in McKinney, Texas. And I just feel God's goodness on our family, our ministry, and just in everything that we do. So that's a little bit about me.
And how long have you been married?
To Rick Jones, who's my husband, we've been married since 2009.
Oh, wow. Wonderful.
Yeah.
That is good.
The journey to get into the field of domestic violence was really a personal one, but it was also a God journey. So as I said before, I experienced childhood sexual abuse, teen dating and violence, and those experiences left me vulnerable and really wounded at a place that I was very easy to fall into abusive and unhealthy relationships.
Yes.
As I got to be a young woman in my 20s, I became educated and realized, those are things that happen to other people. Right? Those are things that don't happen to me.
Yeah.
So I found myself into several abusive relationships, but because I was able to leave that relationship, I never really became aware that there were abusive characteristics that were a pattern in the relationships and the people that I chose. There were red flags. There were things that I could have been warned, but because I didn't realize, and people around me weren't saying, this is abusive, people didn't in those days talk about domestic violence.
Right.
So one day, as I aged into my late 20s, I met what I would have called Mr. Wonderful. And we all have been in those places where you really meet somebody who's going to change your life forever. And I didn't know it at that time. It was going to change my life forever, but not in the way that I thought.
Yes. Change can go either way.
That's right. So he was perfect. He was charming. He was wealthy. He was sophisticated, educated, all of the things that you really look for.
Right.
And my circle of friends, my family, my work colleagues, everyone said things to me like, wow, Brooke, finally, maybe it's your turn, to be happy. And, Brooke, you've had a series of bad choices before, so maybe this time you're going to pick someone. So really blaming me for the problems and the breakups that I had experienced. So we were quickly married. And at that time, I had a very significant career for someone of that age, making very good money. I was very self-sustainable, but we quickly got married. And he said, you know what, Brooke, you don't need to work anymore.
Oh.
I will take care of you. So what do you think I did? I immediately quit my job and lost my financial independence.
Okay.
The second thing that happened, he said, you know what, Brooke, let's go write our own love story. Let's move across the country to a place we don't know anyone, and we'll just start our own life together. Now, that all sounds really wonderful. However, his plans were different. So I said yes to everything. Once I was across the country, I was financially dependent. I was isolated from friends or family, and the abuse began. Verbal abuse turned to physical abuse. It was control. It was days where he would take the kitchen, and if one fork was out of line, then the entire kitchen, everything would just be thrown out onto the floor.
Oh my.
Screaming. It was like a machine gun spray of verbal insults and assaults on a daily basis.
My.
One day I came out of the house and my car was gone. And I said, do you know where my car is? And he goes, oh, don't worry. I've sold your car. I'll be driving you everywhere that you need to go.
Oh, mercy.
So those were the types of behaviors that took away freedom. From the outside, we looked like we lived in a very elegant home, that we had this beautiful life, and a life that you would say, wow, I kind of idolize that, or I envy that. So I was so ashamed and afraid to tell anyone in my family or friends back home that my life was a horrible sleeping with the enemy kind of an experience. So one day, as things often do with abuse, it escalated. And he decided that he was going to beat me and hold me hostage. And so again, I always try to frame this back. This was my husband. This was the person who was to love me, vowed to cherish me, take care of me. And he was holding me hostage in a bathroom for multiple days. Took my glasses, took my phone, and I finally was able to escape when he went into a bathroom, and a taxi driver on the street took me to an emergency room.
Wow.
And so, there I am, and we've been married at this point only about 3 years. So things really escalated quickly. So there I was in the emergency room, and the police did come, and they were talking to me about this thing called domestic violence. And they were saying to me, ma'am, you're a victim of domestic violence, and this is a pamphlet that can help you, and these are the shelters you can go to. And what do you think I said at that point?
Well, you probably said, no, that's not me.
You're absolutely right. And herein lies a lot of the challenges when working with victims or survivors, because I was not able to accept that information or that role. And it wasn't because I didn't believe it. The fear of what he would do to me if I did anything about that, or anyone came to him, was greater than anything that I could imagine.
Wow. And
all I wanted those police officers to do was just get as far away from me as they could. So I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't have anyone to call, didn't have anything. And so at the end of the day, who do you think I called to come pick me up at the hospital?
Please don't tell me your husband.
Yes, it was my husband.
Oh, my.
He came, he picked me up, he took me over to the store to get the prescriptions of the pain medicine that I needed. And then we went home together. And that was a very bad decision, because as you can imagine, while he may have acted nice at the hospital and he acted nice at the prescription drug place, by the time we got home, I had done a very bad thing to him. So in a very short few months after that, I knew that I was going to leave this relationship probably in a body bag, because the abuse was so severe. And so I tried to file for divorce, and I tried to get away from him. You would think that, okay, that's going to be okay. We fortunately did not have children together, and so that was one area that left it just up to me.
Right.
But the challenge is from that point on, for the next 2 years, he stalked me.
Oh, mercy.
Horribly. There were court cases even about the battery, the criminal battery, stalking, aggravated stalking. Not one case ever went in my favor. The only thing that ever happened was I would be humiliated on the stand, and I just spent 2 years running, right? So this time, it was about summer of 2005 by this point, and I was a waif of a person, suicidal. I had nothing left. But here's the one thing that did happen. In those 2 years that I was running, I had always been exposed to biblical teachings and Christianity, but I wouldn't have called myself a Christian.
Okay.
But during that time, I found my Bible. And I began to connect with the Holy Spirit. And in some moments of total fear that he was going to hurt me or kill me, I would just hold the Bible and I would pray. And I became closer to God in that time, and I accepted Jesus during that time.
Wow.
And so,
let me just,
sure.
I want to pause and rewind just a little bit,
Sure.
because as you're talking, you said in the emergency room, you said, "No, this is not me. This is not me. Go
Yes.
away." So 2 questions.
Sure.
Did you, up to that point, did you have any exposure to a faith family or a church or anything in this season of your life there, wherever you were at, moved away? Was there any church family, any support system around you as far as a faith family?
There wasn't that I could connect with,
Okay.
because I wasn't allowed to go to church.
Okay.
He would not have allowed me to go to
Okay.
church. However, I know that God was sending people
Right.
to connect with me. There would be Christians just at a store and they would talk to me.
Right.
I was drawn to Christian music. There were opportunities that people would talk to me, say things to me, that now that I realized, as I looked back later, I thought, those were God's angels. That's how I perceived it,
certainly.
because they were trying to keep me from really dangerous things happening. But there wasn't a faith family, but I don't know that a faith family in that context could have pierced through his control of my ability.
Right.
I wasn't free to go where I wanted. I wasn't free to have friends. I wouldn't have been allowed to go to a church.
Right.
Or even the Bible was kind of a secret that I had to myself.
But God, that was a scripture I even posted today, out of the book of Acts says, "But God raised him from the dead," in the book of Acts. And I just thought that in the midst of all that, somebody needs to hear today, even through this podcast, but God.
Yes.
Even though everything may seem dead, even though everything may seem so dark, there is still the but God element, and sending those little messengers of hope. The reason I asked you about that is because when you said on that emergency room table, "No, this isn't me," here's what I thought. The way we got introduced to domestic violence freedom is what we try to think of it as, and bringing survivors, is that as pastors, I think we sit on the spiritual emergency room tables and say the very same thing, that no, this is not us. No, this is not here in our church. This can't be. This is only in other people's churches or only in the world. I've come to discover as a pastor that it's not necessarily a neglect, it is an ignorance. And in that, what I'm saying is, no, not me. I think there is a stigma that domestic violence only happens to poor, drug strung out, ethnic. Just all these. We put these personas on them, and what we realized, even in our journey with domestic violence victory and survivors, is that last year we had a pastor's wife that gave her testimony that was happening. And that's what our desire is, to break down all of those personas and smoke and mirror things, and let them know this is everywhere. The numbers say one of three, one of every. So you could just go through any group, and there's There's 3 ladies in this room with us right now. So 1, 2, 3. In fact, I know the stories behind all of these ladies here. So there's actually 2 of the 3 in this room. And with that, I think our goal is to try to take pastors and ministers and say, you need to get off of the emergency room tables and quit denying it and go ahead and take the step to try to help people, because it is there. And then can I ask you one more thing before you finish your story?
Absolutely.
You said teen dating.
Yes.
Teen dating violence. I think people have one frame of domestic violence. It's a husband and a wife. So we've discovered there's more than that. Teen dating violence, is that domestic violence?
Yes, it is. And the word domestic violence is really sort of coined for intimate partner violence, which would really connotate husband and wife or same-sex relationships, also relationships that are not married, right? So all of those things, and typically intimate partner violence depicts adults, like 18 and older. But it can be exactly what you said, any economic, social, education, race, religion, like class. There isn't any place it doesn't exist. Now, the teen issue has been, was an area that when we had participants that came into our class, they would say, well, my daughter's already been abused. And it started sparking something in me to say, is really a big problem? What I came to discover is 1 in 3 teenagers experience an abusive or an unhealthy relationship in their teen years. What happens during that time, if that isn't, discussed and educated through to say, you know what, that wasn't healthy, that was controlling behavior, then they take that as a norm, and then they become adults that fall into abusive relationships. So the teen dating and violence is an area where we've done some work to help educate teens and their parents. What are the signs of an unhealthy relationship? Because if a teenager can begin to put those self-esteem and boundaries up, they're going to be better served as they grow older. And
so to speak to guardians or parents, an event like Awareness, an event like Purple, would that be something that they could bring their teenage daughter to expose them to that? Would that be appropriate?
I think it would be very appropriate. I also do think that we talk about the teen girls being sort of abused, but we've also found that finding opportunities to teach both boys and girls, teenagers together in the same setting, with the teens' activities and things like that, helps them formulate what's healthy, right? Have the boys learn too. And that the boys may not be as comfortable in a Purple conference, but there are ways that we can put together places where the boys and the girls have a teen activity and include their parents and talk about healthy relationships versus unhealthy to give them that education. I think the more that we educate people, individuals, communities, pastors, parents, I think we have a better chance of, making a difference in this process.
Back to your story. You were holding your Bible.
Yeah, that happened many a day and many a night. But finally, we had kind of a last meeting showdown, one of those legal mediation moments. And he was there and all of it. And my aunt, thank goodness, she came to sort of be my guardian, and she's a strong believer, and she was like, I'm gonna anoint that room and anoint those chairs. Exactly. So she said to him, why don't you just let her go? Just let her go. Let her sign off on the divorce. Just let her go. And he said, I won't until I destroy her.
Oh, wow.
Just as a matter of fact. And she said, when you look at her, you already have. Because the person that was sitting in that room, I actually have a picture of me at that time. I don't even look like the same person. I was a hollow shell of what used to be a vibrant person. And that's what abuse can do to you over the long haul. And there was something about that triggered in his head that seemed to satisfy whatever need he had, and he was able to sign off on the divorce. And we loaded anything that I had left that night, and we started driving to Texas.
Come on.
And that's how I
God's
ended up
country.
in Texas.
There we
And
go.
so I said, well, I'm here to stay. And so, it took at least a good year for me to rebuild emotionally. I wasn't PTSD and all of those things.
Right.
I couldn't work properly, but step by step, and God was very faithful. And then one day I was in my house and I heard the words stronger than espresso.
Stronger than espresso.
It was as God words that came to me, and I thought, okay, I don't know what that is, but he said, I need you to start writing.
Wow.
I need you to start writing. And that's when I started writing, 2006. So when I started writing, that became, years later in 2012, the original curriculum that we began to use for the survivor support group.
And it was called Stronger Than Espresso.
And
Wow,
that was that was our original organization name.
Well,
Stronger Women came later.
We
but
say
yeah.
it a lot. We have a coffee shop in we call about Jesus and Java. I said Jesus and Java are just like
That's
one
it.
another. I think it's going to be at the marriage supper of the Lamb.
That's it. And I'm telling you, so there's a big pink book down there, and that's what people called our curriculum. It has a big
Stronger
coffee
than
thing,
espresso.
Stronger Than
Come on.
Espresso. And that, I literally wrote that curriculum over time. I got married to Rick. We had 2 kids. We
Wow.
worked full time. I got my master's degree. But literally, God was faithful. It was a lot of work and a lot of obedience. But I shed a lot of tears, and there's over 100 scriptures in that curriculum.
Wow.
And finally it was ready. And around 2012, I published it, and I was like, okay, now what? Because what was missing, which I think is still missing today after all these years, is a place within the church community,
Yes.
or the community at large, that was faith-based, that was affordable, that was accessible, that a survivor could go to and reconnect with the Lord.
Thank you so much for listening to the Free Life Podcast today. I really enjoyed talking to Dr. Brooke and hearing her story. Next week, you'll be able to hear the rest of her testimony in part 2 of the podcast. If you're interested in attending the Purple Conference or even learning more about it, be sure to check out our website at www.freedomplace.tv. Purchase your ticket for only $10 and join us at our Purple Conference, October the 8th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Again, I appreciate you being here with Dr. Brooke and I today, and tune in next week for the rest of her story.